What's up guys, it's Alex and I'm back for another video. Today I'm going to be talking about how to find a job in the United States as an international student. I'll be sharing all of the tips, tricks, lessons that I've picked up over the past 8 years of living in this country. So whether you're just thinking about OPT or CPT or you're right smack in the middle of your job search right now, this video is probably for you. So just to reiterate, the advice that I'm going to be giving in this video is really geared toward international students who are either about to graduate and are preparing for their first full-time job on OPT, or who are looking for an internship, whether it's for the fall, winter, spring, summer, you name it. If you're new to this channel, I just want to give some background about where my knowledge on this topic comes from. I've been an international student myself in this country for many years, so I've done everything from a summer internship to doing my first full-time job on OPT. I've also worked for many years in career counseling services, both at my undergraduate school as well as at my graduate school. So I've picked up quite a few hacks that I hope will make your job search process a lot smoother. The other thing to note is that each person's job searching experience is going to look a little different. It's going to have a lot to do with what you studied in school as well as what jobs or industries you're interested in. So keep that in mind. At the end of the day, it's about applying the strategies that make the most sense for where you want to go. So without further ado, let's jump into the 4 tips I have for finding a job in the US. Tip number 1, ask yourself what you want to do. As an international student, the types of jobs you can do have to be related to what you studied. Now, that doesn't mean that if you studied anthropology that you have to find a job title with the word anthropologist in it. It doesn't have to be that literal, but you do have to figure out what the main point of your studies is and then translate that into your selling point in the job market. For example, I studied sociology in college, so my selling point was that I had a unique understanding of social life, social change, and human behavior. Because my studies were so broad, I could apply to a very wide range of roles, from nonprofit humanitarian work to for-profit marketing roles. It's really about a specific job description and how much it relates to what your selling point is from your studies. From there, I then made a list of all the different positions I qualified for, all the different types of industries that I could be a part of, and then I asked myself what it was from this list I could really see myself doing. From there, I realized I wanted to go for marketing roles. This approach really helped me narrow down my interests because if you studied something as broad as I did, it can be really hard to know what you want, and it's so easy to give in to the desperation of finding a job that you end up applying to anything and everything you qualify for. But if you have some kind of idea of what you want, then you'll be able to streamline your efforts toward a clearer goal. I noticed that when I didn't have a target, I was just applying to jobs all over the place without knowing why I was interested in them, and I didn't see very much traction in my job search. But when I narrowed down my interests to marketing, I started to know exactly what types of keywords I wanted to type into Google and LinkedIn. I became much more specific in the way I wrote my cover letters, and I started to get more calls from recruiters. So knowing what you want to do can really help. Tip number 2, research international student-friendly companies. Now, if you're hoping to stay in the US beyond OPT, like through H-1B sponsorship or something like that, then it'll be especially important to research companies that are open to hiring internationals. I know it's not always easy to do that, but there are a few things you can do. My Visa Jobs is a really helpful database that has a record of which companies have sponsored H-1B visas and green cards in the past few years. So if there's a company that I'm interested in, what I do, for example, is Google the name of the company as well as the search term My Visa Jobs, all in one like that. And if the company has a profile with My Visa Jobs, chances are that it's going to show up in the top 3 search results. If you find it, click on it, and you're likely to see the number of H-1B visas that this company has sponsored over the past few years, what kinds of jobs they were sponsoring for, and what the salaries were of these positions. You'll even get to see, in most cases, the nationalities of the people that were sponsored. Of course, the higher the number of sponsorships, the more likely it is that a specific company is open to hiring international students. That being said, just because a company sponsored 500 H-1B visas last year doesn't mean that they're still going to do that this year or the next year. So looking for companies that are open to sponsoring internationals is kind of a hit or miss situation. The other thing you can do is to look for companies that have offices around the world. These companies tend to be more used to working with internationals. It doesn't mean that they're more likely to sponsor you or that they know what OPT means, but it does mean that they're less likely to be shocked when they find out that you're not American, which, believe it or not, can be a real problem with smaller, more local companies. And then of course, big tech companies like Apple or Google have some of the strongest records with sponsoring internationals. So if you're looking to work in tech and you want to stay in the US for a few more years, you should definitely look up the giants. Tip number 3, Cast your net wide, and I mean this geographically. Don't feel limited to applying to companies in the state where you studied. Of course, you should still do that because companies in your local area are more likely to be familiar with the school you went to, but also think about the industry you want to be in, and then ask yourself or ask Google where your industry hotspots are in the US. For example, if you wanted to work in the film industry, then you should definitely look at Los Angeles. If you wanted to work for a fashion magazine, then look at New York. If you want to work in tech, obviously Seattle, San Francisco. That being said, some cities are still growing hubs for certain industries, and they might not be as well known for what they're able to provide you with. For example, Minneapolis is a growing hub for tech startups. So is Austin, Texas. The US is huge and innovation is happening everywhere. So do some research on where it is you're more likely to find the jobs that you want, and don't be afraid to branch out. The other thing is that cities on the east and west coasts tend to be more internationally diverse, partly because there are more international businesses there as well as international students. So terms like OPT and sponsorship are more widely known, which could make it easier on you when it comes to explaining your situation to potential employers. For example, when I was in Minnesota, I had a really hard time trying to tell employers what OPT was, the fact that I had 1 year of guaranteed work authorization and that nobody has to sponsor me right off the bat. But it didn't matter because as soon as I said the words international student, people freaked out. In fact, once a recruiter hung up on me halfway through our call because she found out I was an international student. So when I moved to Boston, I was prepared for the worst. I avoided using the word international student too early. I was prepared to calm employers down. But when I started interviewing for internships for the summer, earlier this year, I was really surprised to see how calm recruiters were about my status. I was surprised that they knew that my school was responsible for issuing my CPT and that it wasn't on them to do that. They knew exactly what paperwork I needed during onboarding. I was shocked. I'm not saying that everything is perfect on the East Coast. I'm just saying that everything is perfect on the East Coast. I'm not saying that things are perfect on the East and West Coasts. I'm just saying that there tend to be higher populations of international companies and international students out here, so you're likely to have a very different experience than in other parts of the country where this is not the case. A little bonus tip for applying to jobs outside of the state that you live in is to not put your city on your resume. Trust me folks, putting your address on your resume is a very outdated thing. People don't need to know where you live. That was only useful back when people used to mail resumes. Now it's kind of intrusive, and in a digital age, people only need your email address and most your phone number. The benefit of saying what your city is just to let employers know in the city that you live in that you're locally based. So if I lived in New York and I wanted to apply to a job in New York, saying on my resume that I'm in New York is going to be to my advantage. But saying to an employer in New York that I live in Minnesota is not going to be helpful. So if you're trying to move to another city in the US, don't be afraid to omit your current city from your resume. The most important thing is that you have your email address, your phone number, your LinkedIn profile, and in some cases, your portfolio. Tip number 4, last but not least, network. This is something that I feel like everybody tells you to do, but it's one of those things that's actually much harder than it sounds. It's something that I definitely need to be better at myself. But basically, it's exactly what you think it is. You never know who you know, and you never know who they know, and you never know what opportunities that might lead to. It's not just about attending a networking event or sending a few cold messages on LinkedIn. It's about actually participating in the conversations that come. As you probably already know, when you meet someone, whether it's the CEO of a company or somebody who has the exact job title that you want, the goal is to form some kind of connection with them. Whether it's that you went to the same school or you both have an interest in the same sports, you're not going to ask for a job right off the bat, okay? Imagine if someone introduced themselves to you and said, "Do you have a job for me?" That's just a very overwhelming question. It's kind of awkward. For the first conversation, you just want to share your professional story, maybe your elevator pitch, if that's what you call it. And then it's about asking the other person about their professional story and forming some kind of connection. If you don't have anything in common, that's okay. And if somebody doesn't reply your cold message on LinkedIn, that's okay. I think in situations like this, it's always important to remind yourself that if somebody doesn't reply, it's not always about you. It's, likely that they're really busy, or maybe they're not as active on LinkedIn as you are. The point is, try not to take it personally when somebody doesn't reply you because they've never met you, they don't know you yet. And you can either wait a few days and poke them or move on to the next person, right? Now you know that this isn't somebody that you are going to have a lot of productivity with, and that's okay. There's so many people in this world that you can connect with. Now, in terms of where to start, it can be a little bit tricky, especially during a pandemic when there are no networking events happening. But as a student, take advantage of your school's alumni network. You'd be surprised to find out who went to your university and who you might be able to start a conversation with. The other thing you can do is to use LinkedIn to look up the companies that you're interested in, and then use LinkedIn's advanced search or advanced filters to figure out what employees at this company went to your university or what employees at this company you have a mutual connection with on LinkedIn. It's totally okay to reach out to these people to ask for an informational interview, to ask them how they got to where they are, what they love about their jobs. But again, don't be disheartened if they don't respond. Just move on to the next person. Everyone's job search process is going to look a little different depending on what you studied, what you want to do with your career, and whether or not you even want to stay in the US. Sometimes finding out the best strategies for you are a trial and error process, so I encourage you to try out any of the tips I brought up today that you maybe might not have heard of before. I know that the pandemic has made things harder for international students, but I also know that there are many people who are still trying to make it work here, and that not everybody can just go home right now. So I hope that the tips that I shared today can be somewhat helpful for you no matter what stage of the job search process you're at. Now, if you like what you saw today, then please remember to give this video a quick thumbs up, and if you found the advice useful, then please share it with your other international student friends who might be looking for advice right now. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel to stay tuned for more international student content. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope you're staying safe, and I'll see you in the next video.